June 1965, Okefenokee Swamp. Training Lane 3, northern edge of the refuge. Our 7-man recon team moved through waist-deep water under red light. The air smelled like diesel and rot. Cicadas were loud enough to feel in the chest. We were 2 hours past check-in. The compass needle drifted every few minutes. The radio hissed even when squelch was tight. Sergeant Mullins kept saying the swamp was alive. He meant it half as a joke, but I could tell he felt watched. Then we heard the sound. Not gator, not hog. A slow, wet drag, followed by a deep breath that rattled the cattails. The water in front of us rippled in a circle, like something wide had surfaced. I raised my light. That was when we saw it. Tall, standing straight in the dark water, skin like wet leather with a green shine. Eyes caught the red beam and held it, arms long, hands ending in points that didn't look human. We froze. Nobody spoke. The thing tilted its head once, then stepped back and was gone. That was the night we saw the lizard man devil of Okefenokee. The trucks were waiting miles ahead, but we still had to get there alive. Before we start the video, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. It only takes a second. Thank you. We were from Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 30th Infantry Regiment, Fort Stewart, Georgia. Summer of 1965. Most of us had been in uniform less than 2 years. We were still learning how to move quiet, how to trust a map, and how to think like a team. Vietnam was starting to pull men away, but we were still stateside. The swamp lanes were meant to sharpen our navigation and endurance before overseas deployment. I was a corporal then, team leader for a 7-man recon element. Mullins was the sergeant in charge of the phase lane. He had combat time in Korea and didn't talk much. The others were young. Harris was the radio man. Ruiz carried the M60 for realism, even though we had no live belts for the lane. The rest had M14 rifles with blanks and red adapters. Standard training load. The Okefenokee wasn't a normal training ground. It was partly a refuge and partly old timber company land. The Army had an agreement to use some of the outer marsh for navigation exercises. We were not allowed to fire live rounds or disturb wildlife. The rule was simple. Stay in the marked corridor, stay off the nesting islands, and check in every 4 hours. We started at first light. Heat was already building. By noon, the air was thick enough to taste. The black water reflected everything like a mirror. Movement was slow. Every step sank. Sometimes you'd pull up a boot and see bubbles rising from the peat. The smell stayed on your clothes. The plan was to move 12 kilometers through the northern sector, find 3 hidden markers, and link up with the safety jeep near a sand road by 2300 hours. The swamp wasn't dangerous in the usual way, but it had its own rules. There were snakes, gators, and soft spots that could take a man down to the waist. We used poles to test the ground ahead. About 4 hours in, we stopped near a small hummock covered in palmetto. Mullins gave us 10 minutes to rest and drink. The insects were thick around our faces. Harris kept swatting at them with his map case. Ruiz said the place felt wrong. He pointed to a patch of reeds twisted together above head height, like something had bent them and woven them tight. Nobody could explain how it happened. We marked the grid on the map. Mullins said, "Nature does odd things out here," and moved us on. But none of us forgot it. By late afternoon, thunder started to roll in from the south. Storms built fast in that heat. The light went yellow and the wind moved in sudden bursts. We stopped under a group of cypress trees to pull ponchos from the packs. That was when I noticed the first sign the instruments weren't right. My compass needle drifted 10 degrees east, then swung back. It didn't hold steady again for the rest of the night. Harris tried the radio check on the PRC-25. Nothing but static. He adjusted the antenna and changed frequency. Still nothing. We figured terrain and weather were blocking the signal, which wasn't unusual in thick swamp, but it added a layer of unease. We pushed on another kilometer. The ground leveled out into open water broken by narrow ridges. Mullins ordered a silent column. We moved single file, 5 meters spacing, red lights off. The swamp was darker than any forest. The air held still, and the only sound was the slap of water against our gear. Somewhere behind us, a splash echoed, slow, heavy, like a body stepping in. We froze. I scanned with my light, but saw only ripples fading into black water. Mullins waited 10 seconds, then motioned us forward again. He didn't speak, and nobody asked questions. By the time we reached the first navigation marker, the storm was close. Lightning flashed behind the tree line, showing the swamp in white shapes. The heat broke for a moment, then came back heavier. We were ahead of schedule, but Mullins decided to hold at that marker for an hour until the lightning cleared. We dug in shallow, half kneeling on a dry ridge of peat. The smell of sulfur hung thick. Ruiz kept staring into the water, whispering that something was moving under the surface. I told him to relax, probably a gator or a big turtle. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe it. The storm passed, but the quiet after was worse. No frogs, no birds, just breathing and the faint tap of rain dripping off leaves. Mullins finally gave the signal to move. That silence stayed with us as we entered the next sector, the one where everything started to go wrong. The second sector was rough country, full of narrow cuts, tall reeds, and black pools that swallowed light. The map showed old tram lines from when logging crews worked this area decades earlier. Most had sunk back into the swamp, but you could still feel the packed earth under your boots now and then. It was the only solid ground for kilometers. We were moving by red lens again. The swamp reflected the light in strange ways, like metal under the surface. Every few minutes, we stopped to check bearing and spacing. Mullins led, I followed, then Harris with the radio, Ruiz behind him, and the rest covering rear. At 2100, we reached the second navigation marker, a rusted metal pole half buried in peat. That meant we were halfway through the route. The plan was to hold position, eat, and start the night movement to the final checkpoint. The extraction truck would meet us by the sand road near midnight. While the others ate, I walked a short distance toward the canal. The water was flat, but something about it felt off. It reflected light from the stars, but not evenly, like it moved under the surface. I crouched and listened, nothing but faint air bubbles breaking now and then. When I turned back, Ruiz was looking my way. He said he heard breathing out there, heavy and slow. I told him the swamp makes strange sounds, and it does. You can't always tell distance because the trees throw the echoes around. Still, the way he said it made me uneasy. We moved out again after 20 minutes. The storm had passed, but mist was forming low over the water. We walked into it, and the air cooled a few degrees. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. We switched to single file and kept tighter spacing. The radio still didn't pick up the safety channel. The compass needle continued to drift. At one point, Harris stumbled and almost went down. He said something brushed against his leg. When we pulled him up, his pant leg was wet halfway to the thigh, and there were streaks of dark residue on the fabric, like oil mixed with mud. We wiped it off and kept going. A few minutes later, Mullins raised a fist to stop us. Ahead of him, something stood near the edge of a small clearing. I thought it was a cypress stump at first, tall and narrow. Then it moved. It turned slightly, and the red light caught what looked like a shoulder. The shape wasn't hunched like a bear. It was upright, still, and too thin. Mullins aimed his light low, but before he could find it again, the thing stepped sideways and was gone. No splash, no sound, just gone. He didn't say a word, just motioned us to keep moving. We all did. Nobody wanted to admit what they'd seen, not yet. By 2230, the air felt heavy again, like the storm had circled back. Lightning flickered far to the east, and the glow gave us enough to see the next marker, a wooden post driven into a hummock. When we reached it, we found the wood clawed deep, not scratches from tools. Deep gouges, uneven, like a hand with claws had raked down. Mullins leaned in and ran his finger through one of the marks. The edge was clean, not weathered, fresh. We heard a splash behind us, then another, closer. The radio hissed to life for half a second, static mixed with a low tone like someone blowing across a bottle. Harris tried to raise the safety jeep, but nothing came through. We went into a tight 360, weapons out, red lights off. The swamp was quiet except for water dripping from the cypress knees. My heart was hammering. I remember thinking that the air smelled like copper, sharp and sour. Then a ripple came from the middle of the pool, moving in a wide arc. It circled once, then stopped. Mullins whispered for us to back out slowly. We took 5 steps and something rose out of the water behind the reeds. It wasn't a clear sight, just a dark outline against the mist. Taller than a man, with a shape that looked wrong in the shoulders and neck. The light caught scales or something like them before it sank back down. We didn't chase. We didn't talk. We moved straight to the next sector, double time, until the trees thinned and we reached firmer ground. Nobody looked back. That was the last normal hour of that mission. The next part was when we realized it wasn't just something out there, it was following us. The ground under us turned from peat to packed sand mixed with old roots. You could hear your own boots now. No more soft water sounds. That should have been a relief, but it only made the silence worse. The frogs didn't come back. Neither did the birds. We moved in a staggered line, eyes scanning the sides. I kept checking our rear because I couldn't shake the feeling that something was walking the same route, just out of sight. The swamp has echoes, but this wasn't echo. These steps matched our timing too well. When we stopped, it stopped. Mullins called a short break. Everyone dropped packs and pulled canteens. The heat hadn't let up. Even at night, it pressed against your skin. Harris sat against a log, rubbing his leg where that residue had touched him earlier. His skin looked raw, like mild burn. Ruiz said quietly, "It's pacing us." He wasn't joking. I saw the sweat on his face even in the dim light. Nobody answered. We all knew he was right. The radio gave a brief burst of static again, then a single tone, a low hum that rose and cut out. Harris said it wasn't any army signal he knew. Mullins told him to power it off and keep moving. We advanced through the tree line into a shallow basin, maybe 50 yards wide. The water was shin deep, still and black. The surface reflected the sky like glass. We crossed slowly. Halfway through, the water rippled around us as if something large passed underneath. Not fast, just steady. I could feel it brushing my legs once, twice. Thick, smooth, heavy. Ruiz whispered that he saw eyes under the surface. Twin reflections low in the water, watching. I wanted to tell him to stop imagining things, but I saw them too. They blinked once, then slipped deeper, the glow fading out. We reached the far side and climbed onto a dry rise. Mullins had us take security positions. He stood still, listening, before motioning me over. He pointed back at the water. There were small circles moving outward from the center of the basin, too even to be natural, like something was walking below the surface in slow circles. I asked if we should move north to higher ground. He nodded, but before we could, a deep sound rolled through the trees. Not a roar. More like a drawn-out breath through a hollow tube. Long, slow, wet. It echoed until it was hard to tell direction. Every animal in that swamp went silent again. Even the insects stopped. Mullins said, "We go now." We moved out in pairs, weapons up, staying quiet. The air smelled metallic, like old blood. My shirt stuck to my back with sweat, and my boots felt heavier with each step. I could hear my heart thumping through the web gear straps. We came upon a stretch of cypress knees sticking out of the water like a field of spikes. Ruiz tripped once and splashing, and everyone froze. That's when I saw movement at our rear, maybe 20 meters away. A figure moved between the trees, upright, shoulders narrow, arms long, head sloped forward. It stepped slow, no hurry. The reflection of the moon showed the skin wet and scaled. I remember the faint outline of the jaw, wide and flat, like a snout pressed too close to human shape. It stopped, turned toward us, and lifted its head slightly. I could see its eyes even from that distance, catching what little light there was. Yellow-green. Not round like human eyes, more vertical, with a slit. Mullins whispered, "Don't move." We didn't. Nobody breathed. The thing stood for maybe 5 seconds, then turned sideways and slid into the water without sound. No splash, just gone, as if it melted back into the swamp. Mullins ordered us to keep moving north to the extraction route, no stops. He didn't call for radio check again. Nobody wanted to hear that static. We covered another half-kilometer before Harris stumbled again. His skin looked worse, gray patches near his calf. He said it burned. We wrapped it with gauze and iodine from the kit. He kept moving, but slower. The ground began to rise slightly, drier patches underfoot. Trees thinned, and I saw a faint glow from the west, maybe moonlight reflecting off standing water. The air cooled again. Then came the noise. Not from behind this time, but to our left. A splash, then a drag, like something large crawling out of the water. We aimed lights toward it, but all we caught was movement, grass bending, reeds parting. Whatever it was, it didn't run. It kept pace, hidden. Mullins motioned to pick up speed. We could see the outline of the last marker post ahead. That meant the sand road was less than a kilometer beyond it. The Jeep would be there. Safety, at least on paper. We started to jog the last stretch. The swamp made it hard, but adrenaline helped. The sound stayed with us, sometimes close, sometimes far, always matching our movement. At one point, Ruiz turned his light back and said he saw it again. Standing in the middle of the trail, arms hanging low, head tilted. The beam caught the chest, and you could see it breathe. Broad ribs, scales that caught the red glow like wet glass. Then the light flickered and it vanished. We reached the marker. The wood pole was cracked near the base. Claw marks again, fresh. 5 deep grooves. We set up a quick perimeter. Mullins wanted to hold for a count of 60 before moving to the road. The plan was to stay quiet, get our bearings, and push through the last stretch together. The seconds dragged. Every sound seemed louder: the creak of gear, the breath through mass, the slow drip of water from branches. Then we heard a new sound, light but sharp. Footsteps on dry ground behind us. Not splashing, not sloshing, walking. Mullins turned to face it. His light came up, and that's when we all saw it again, standing clear, not 50 feet away. The lizard man. Full height, maybe 7 feet, dark green skin wet with water, head narrow, eyes bright, hands long, ending in black points. It didn't run, it just stared. Then it moved one step forward. That was the moment we stopped being a training team. We were now something else, men trying to survive whatever was out there. The thing took that one step forward, then stopped. Its eyes caught every bit of light we had. I remember the surface of its skin, slick, patterned like fish hide but darker. It made no sound, no heavy breathing, nothing human. Mullins raised his hand to hold fire. We only had blanks and everyone knew it. A blank rifle wouldn't stop anything. We waited. The creature tilted its head, almost studying us, then eased back into the shadows until only the shine of its eyes remained. "Move," Mullins said. We pulled back in pairs, rifles up. The road was close now, maybe 700 meters. The swamp began to dry out into flat scrub, but every few steps we heard the same slow movement in the water to our flank, keeping pace again. When we reached a narrow channel, Mullins ordered us to cross. I went first, testing the depth with my pole. It came up to my chest. The water was cool and black. Halfway through, something brushed my thigh. Not fish, not root. It was rough, like the edge of bark, but alive. I turned and saw ripples spreading toward Ruiz behind me. He froze. Then a dark shape surfaced between us, wide as a door. It stayed under just long enough for me to see the outline of a head and shoulder before slipping down again. Ruiz shouted and stumbled forward. We dragged him across to the far side. Once everyone was out, Mullins took a knee and called for a head count. All accounted for, but Ruiz was shaking. His pant leg was torn. We checked him under the red light, small cuts along his shin, not deep but lined in a strange pattern, like 3 short slashes and 1 long one across. It didn't look like a branch or gator bite. We had to keep moving. The radio gave one more burst of static, then we heard a faint voice through the noise. Couldn't make it out, but it sounded like copy or contact. We tried replying, no answer. Mullins said to keep the antenna up and maintain direction. The ground ahead rose slightly. We could smell pine, which meant we were nearing the sand road. The Jeep should have been close. I could almost see open sky through the trees when a splash echoed behind us again, louder this time. Then another, closer. Harris turned back, scanning with his red light. It caught movement, a ripple spreading fast. Then we saw it lift out of the water again. This time clearer, closer. The same shape, tall and narrow, shoulders high, arms reaching almost to its knees. Water streamed off its skin in sheets. The head turned toward us, eyes glowing like glass marbles in the dark. We froze. Nobody breathed. Then it let out that sound again, a low, hollow exhale that rolled through the trees. It wasn't angry. It was measured, almost curious. Mullins whispered, "Go!" We moved fast now. No formation, just controlled speed. I could hear the water behind us breaking again. Not running, but following. Steady, sure. The Jeep horn should have sounded by now. Nothing. The swamp felt endless. After another 100 meters, Harris tripped and went down hard. His radio hit the mud, static crackling. I reached to pull him up, and the radio light blinked once. In that flash, I saw something on the far side of the channel. Two shapes, not one. Both tall, both standing. One stepped forward and the other followed, mirroring its move. That was when I knew it wasn't one creature out there. There were at least two. We got Harris up and kept running. The ground firmed under our boots. We broke out of the last line of trees, and there it was, the sand road pale under the moonlight. The Jeep sat 50 yards away, parked under a pine. No lights on, no sound. Mullins called out, no answer. We moved closer, rifles up. When we reached the Jeep, we found the driver's side door open and the engine cold. Keys still in. No tracks around it, just deep indentations in the sand, too large for boots. 5-point impressions like something with claws had walked in circles around the vehicle. Mullins shut the door, told us to mount up, and started the engine. It turned over slow, then caught. We loaded in, 3 in back, 3 on the benches, Mullins driving. I sat by the tailgate, rifle ready. The radio still hissed softly. As we pulled away, I looked back down the road. In the rear light, I saw it standing on the shoulder. Same height, same posture, watching us leave. Then as the engine noise rose, it stepped off the road and was gone again into the trees. Nobody spoke on the ride back. Even Ruiz, who always talked, sat silent. We drove straight to the range shack at the edge of the training zone. Mullins signed the logbook, reported completion, and said nothing about what happened. The range NCO didn't ask. He just looked at the mud on our uniforms and said, "Swamp will do that." Inside the barracks, Harris's leg looked worse. The rash had spread higher, almost to his knee, dark gray under the skin. The medics said it might be an infection from swamp water and wrapped it tight. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying that sound, that slow breath echoing in the dark. It wasn't an animal noise. It had rhythm, control. It was aware of us. At 0300, I went outside for air. The sky was clearing. You could see stars again. The swamp edge shimmered with ground fog. Somewhere out there, I heard a faint splash. Just one, then silence. By morning, the officers called us in for a short debrief. Simple questions: route, timing, weather, equipment issues. Mullins answered by the book. No one mentioned what we saw. Not one word. But when we left the room, I noticed the operations clerk watching us. He looked pale, tired. Later, he told me quietly that we weren't the first team to come back like that. 2 years earlier, another patrol had reported figures in the water. The file had been sealed. That was the moment I realized what we walked into wasn't new. Whatever lived in that swamp had been there long before we stepped in, and it knew how to stay hidden. The day after the mission, we were told to stay on base. No outside calls, no movement off post. The reason given was equipment inspection and report review. That never happened before. Usually after a field problem, we cleaned gear and went home by noon. Mullins stayed quiet. He went straight to the ops office and stayed there most of the morning. When he came out, he looked angry but calm. The kind of calm that means someone gave him an order he didn't like. He told us we'd be rerunning the same lane in 48 hours. That didn't make sense. The swamp was a navigation exercise, not a repeated test. He said it was a verification patrol, and that command wanted to check our recorded grids because instruments showed drift. I knew that was a cover. Our instruments had drifted, but no one in command cared about map grids that much. Something else had come up. Harris didn't go. His leg had swollen overnight. The rash had spread up to his thigh, skin mottled dark and hard to the touch. The medics couldn't explain it. They sent him to the post hospital. We visited him before we left. He looked pale, sweating, like he'd lost too much salt. He said he kept hearing something at night, a slow breath by his window. He thought it was a dream. We left him there and went back to the swamp. Same route, same loadout. The only difference was the radio. They gave us a new PRC-25 and told us to log all static bursts and tones. That was the only order that sounded real. Someone higher up had read the interference notes. The swamp looked different that day, quieter. The air felt heavier, even before noon. The water didn't reflect light the same way. It had a darker tint, almost oily. We moved out on schedule. Mullins made us mark every sign of disturbance from the first mission: broken branches, disturbed mud, bent reeds. Some had settled back. Others looked fresh again, like someone had walked through after we left. At around 1600 hours, we reached the second marker, the same rusted pole from before. The scratches we'd seen earlier were still there, but they were deeper now. The wood had fresh cuts, lighter in color. The claw lines ran lower too, as if whatever made them had crouched. Ruiz said quietly, "It's been here again." Nobody answered. We took a short break, then moved toward the final sector. That was where we had first seen it standing. My stomach tightened as we stepped into the same path. The reeds were bent down in a line that matched where we'd run the first night. Something had walked through since then. The footprints were faint but wide. No shoe tread, just deep impressions, long and smooth, ending in five-pointed tips. The radio came alive again, faint hum first, then a burst of static followed by a low tone, same as before. But this time, it didn't fade. The sound stayed steady, rising and falling like slow breathing through the speaker. Harris had called it that before. Now it sounded identical. Mullins ordered the volume down, but the tone didn't stop. It was as if something was transmitting through an open channel that didn't belong to any frequency we knew. The swamp went quiet again. No frogs, no birds. I checked the compass. The needle spun a full circle and stopped at west. I turned the compass away and moved again. The air smelled like sulfur. Then Ruiz said, "We're not alone." He was right. Across the channel, half hidden behind the cypress roots, something was watching. Same shape, same height. But this time I saw two, one behind the other, both standing upright, unmoving. I couldn't see details, just silhouettes through the mist, but I could feel the weight of their eyes. Mullins whispered, "Back out, slow." We started to move. The shapes didn't. They stood, still as trees. Then one tilted its head, same motion as before, and slipped back into the water. The second followed. No splash, just rings on the surface. We backed up until the ground turned to solid peat. Mullins called for an immediate extraction to the nearest sand road, 2 kilometers west. We started the movement, quiet, deliberate. No one talked. Halfway through, Ruiz went down. He didn't trip. He just stopped walking and dropped to one knee. He said his chest hurt. His breathing was fast, shallow. His pulse hammered like a drum. We checked him. No wounds, no bite, nothing visible. His eyes looked unfocused, like he was seeing something behind us. Then we heard it again, the same long, wet breath, but closer than before. It wasn't behind us anymore. It was right beside us, maybe 10 meters out in the water. We spread out in a half circle, rifles ready. The sound grew louder, echoing off the trees. The radio started hissing again, matching the same rhythm as that breath. It was copying it. The tone rose when the sound rose, fell when it fell. Ruiz started shaking, like he was freezing. Mullins ordered me and 2 others to pull him back toward the high ground. The rest covered. As we moved, I looked over my shoulder and saw ripples forming a line through the water. Fast, direct, closing in. Then it stopped. The swamp went still again. No noise, no motion. Ruiz stopped breathing for several seconds, then gasped and came back. His pulse steadied. We pulled him up and carried him until the sand road appeared through the trees. When we reached the extraction point, the Jeep was there this time, engine running. 2 men from operations sat inside, both wearing plain uniforms with no name tapes. One held a clipboard. They asked Mullins for a quick debrief before we even loaded Ruiz. He gave short answers. The man with the clipboard wrote notes but didn't ask for clarification. Then he said quietly, "You didn't see anything unusual. Do you understand?" Mullins didn't reply. We drove back in silence. Ruiz lay in the back, breathing steady but pale. I kept my eyes on the road. The swamp disappeared behind us in the mirror, black and endless. That night, operations sealed our report under a new tag. Training Incident 65B. We were told not to discuss it, But I couldn't forget that sound, that breathing, echoing through the radio like it had learned us, like it wanted us to know it was still there. That night I didn't sleep. The base felt heavier than usual, quiet in a way I couldn't name. By morning we heard that Ruiz had been transferred to a medical lab in Jacksonville. No explanation, we never saw him again. 2 days later, Mullins called the rest of us to the briefing room. A major from Division Intelligence was there, uniform pressed, no insignia on his name tape. He said he was from Environmental Observation Command. I'd never heard of that office. He thanked us for our cooperation, then said one line that stayed with me forever. "You will return to the area tonight. Full security detail. We will observe." We didn't argue. Orders are orders. We left at dusk, 2 jeeps this time. Each had floodlights, live ammunition, and 160mm mortar for illumination. They said it was in case of predators. Nobody believed that. We were joined by 3 men in plain fatigues, with clipboards and film cameras sealed in waterproof cases. They didn't introduce themselves. The route was the same, but this time, the swamp felt alive before we even stopped. The air was cold, though the day had been hot. No bugs, no frogs, not even the hum of mosquitoes, just stillness. We dismounted near the second marker. The plainclothes men set up the cameras, one aimed at the canal, another at the tree line. They had tripods with infrared lenses. The rest of us fanned out in a tight semicircle, covering sectors. Mullins walked the perimeter, checking every field of fire. It was full dark by 2200. We waited. The radio crackled again. Same low tone. The techs wrote down the time. The sound grew louder. It wasn't interference this time. It was deliberate, patterned. Long draw in, long release. Breathing. One of the techs whispered to Mullins that the signal was coming from the southwest, about 100 meters out. He asked permission to move a receiver closer. Mullins gave him 2 men for cover. They disappeared into the dark. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. Then we heard a scream. Short, sharp, then cut off. Mullins called their call signs. No answer. The radio hissed once, then went dead. He ordered flares up. The first burst lit the swamp white. Steam rose from the water, and the whole area glowed silver under the light. I scanned with my rifle, breathing fast. Then I saw it. At the edge of the clearing, half in water, stood one of the missing men, or what was left of him. His body was upright but slack, head tilted to the side. His chest moved once, then stopped. Behind him, something large shifted in the mist. The flare burned out. Darkness swallowed everything. We fired another. The light came back, harsh and blinding. The man was gone. Only ripples where he'd stood. Then the water erupted. The creature burst upward from the canal, straight out of the black water. Tall, wide-shouldered, skin shining wet green. Eyes bright like mirrors catching the flare. Mouth open, lined with small, sharp teeth. Not fangs, just rows like a fish's mouth, perfect and clean. It stood for half a second, then dropped low and charged through the shallows toward us. The sound it made wasn't a roar. It was a hiss that built into a high, shaking pitch. "Fire!" Mullins shouted. The M14S opened up, real rounds this time. The gunfire thundered across the swamp. Water exploded with each hit. I saw rounds connect, splashes of dark fluid, but it didn't fall. It kept coming. Someone launched a flare over it. The light flared red against its scales. You could see the muscle move under the skin, the ribs expanding with each breath. The creature reached the edge of the dry ground. Then it stopped. It didn't attack. It stood, eyes wide, breathing hard. Then it turned and slid back into the canal, vanishing like a shadow melting into ink. The flares burned out again, leaving us in pitch dark. No sound, no movement, just our breathing. Mullins ordered illumination mortar fire along the canal line. 3 rounds. Each burst filled the air with light. We saw nothing but broken reeds and churned mud. Whatever it was gone again. We regrouped, counted everyone. 1 man missing. The tech who'd gone forward first. No body, no radio, no trace. The officers didn't chase. They pulled us back to the jeeps. As we loaded, I caught a reflection in the distance. 2 points of light above the waterline, unmoving. watching. We drove back to base without speaking. The plainclothesmen took the film, the notes, everything. We never saw them again either. That night I cleaned my rifle 3 times. The black residue from that swamp clung to the barrel like grease. No solvent removed it. I still remember the smell, metallic and sour. By morning, the area was sealed. The order said wildlife hazard and chemical contamination. Nobody was allowed near the swamp again without clearance. I saw Mullins once more that week. He looked worn down, eyes bloodshot. He said quietly, "We weren't supposed to fire." They wanted to see what it would do. I asked what he meant. He just shook his head. Then he said, "Whatever it was learning." The look in his eyes told me he meant it. That phrase stayed with me. It was learning. We were ordered to remain on standby for 3 days. Nobody left the post, nobody talked. The swamp operation was listed as training suspended. The official reason was lightning damage to equipment. Everyone knew that was a lie. The base rumor mill worked fast. Men in supply said the field lab pulled water samples full of strange organic material. Mechanics from motor pool said one Jeep came back with deep scratches under the chassis, like metal had been scraped by stone. No one could prove anything, but everyone felt it. The post carried a quiet tension, like the air before a storm. On the 3rd night, around 2300, Mullins came to my barracks. He wore fatigues but no rank. He said we were going back one last time. Not command approved, just him, me, one driver. He wanted to find the missing tech's body before the swamp swallowed it for good. I hesitated. Then I went. We took a Jeep and 2 rifles. No radio. Mullins said he didn't want to hear that tone again. The drive down was silent. The night sky hung low, moon half hidden. The swamp road looked different now. The ditches flooded from new rain. We parked near the old marker. The air smelled sharp, like metal and rain mixed. The ground felt soft under our boots. Every step made the mud groan. We moved in by flashlight, keeping low. The canal ahead was still, no ripple. The sound of our breathing echoed in the dark. We reached the spot where the tech had vanished. The tripod and 1 camera still lay half sunk in the mud. The film roll inside was gone. Mullins crouched to check the mud around it. He brushed his hand over a patch that looked darker than the rest. Then he froze. There were prints, not just one. A set of them side by side, pressed deep into the peat. 5 long points, wide heel, narrow mid-step. The stride between them was nearly 6 feet. He looked at me and whispered, "It came out of the water here." Not in before I could answer. Something splashed across the canal, slow and heavy. The water rippled in 3 directions at once, then silence again. We backed up to the higher ground, rifles ready. The flashlight beam shook slightly in my hand. I tried to steady it. Then the beam caught movement on the far side, something rising out of the water. First the head, narrow and scaled, eyes reflecting the light like a cat's. Then the shoulders, arms long, ending in claws that glinted wet. The body followed, standing to full height in the shallows. It was taller than I remembered, maybe 7 feet. Its chest rose and fell slowly, like it was breathing deep, calm. The eyes didn't blink. Mullins whispered, "Don't move." The creature tilted its head again, that same slow motion, almost studying us. Then it stepped forward, 1 stride at a time, until it reached the edge of the canal. The mud under its feet hissed and bubbled, like it was burning. The air grew thick. My skin felt cold. The flashlight began to fade, dimming on its own. I raised my rifle, and for the first time, Mullins didn't stop me. I aimed center mass and fired. The flash lit the whole area. I saw the rounds hit, small bursts against its chest. It staggered once but didn't fall. It looked straight at me. Then it made the same long, low sound. A breath through a hollow chest, deep and steady. Mullins fired 2, 3 rounds. The creature stepped back into the canal, still facing us. The water rose around it, then closed over its head. The ripples widened, spreading until they reached our boots. We stood there a long time, rifles raised, waiting. Nothing. Only the faint pop of bubbles breaking the surface where it went down. Mullins reloaded and said, "We're done." We pulled out, walking fast but steady. No more talk. We reached the Jeep by 300. The tires were half sunk in mud. The engine turned twice, then caught. As we drove out, I looked back one last time. The water behind us moved again, just once. A wide ripple rolled across the canal and faded. We got back to base before dawn. No one stopped us at the gate. Mullins turned in the rifles and left without a word. By noon, the swamp access road was blocked by engineers with bulldozers. They said they were sealing off the area for soil stability work. They filled the canal near the marker with sand and concrete. The section of the road we had driven was later marked off limits on every new map. A week later, Division issued new training routes, all far from the swamp. The old one was gone, erased from the files. Even the coordinates changed. I saw Mullins one last time before I shipped out to Vietnam. He looked thin, tired. We stood outside the mess hall. He said quietly, "Whatever that was, it didn't act wild. It acted aware." I nodded. He added, "And it let us leave." That line never left me. In Vietnam, I saw worse things. War always gives you that, but nothing ever felt the same as that swamp. Nothing that calm, that patient. Years later, when I looked up old maps, that whole section of Okefenokee was listed as restricted environmental zone. No military use, no public access. I don't know what they found after us, but I'm certain someone went back, and I'm certain it's still there. That night in 1965 wasn't just the end of a training mission. It was contact with something that didn't belong to our world, but understood it better than we did. It watched us walk in, tested us, and then decided to let us go. The Army can erase maps, lock files, and seal stories, but they can't change what we saw under that flare. It was real. After the swamp was sealed, life moved on, at least on the surface. New orders came, and most of us were sent overseas. The Okefenokee mission faded from official talk, like it had never happened. Only the 7 of us remembered, and even that number didn't last. Ruiz stayed in the hospital for weeks. When I tried to visit, the staff said he'd been moved again. No record of where. Later, a clerk in medical supply told me he'd been transferred under a civilian research contract. I never saw his name on Army rosters again. Mullins left the service early. Officially, medical retirement. Unofficially, he didn't sleep. Word was he started hearing that same breathing at night, slow and deep, right before the lights flickered. I believe him. As for me, I went to Vietnam a month later. Combat pushed the memory aside, but not for long. In the jungle, at night, when everything was quiet, I'd hear that sound in my head again, that slow exhale, that calm rhythm that didn't belong to any man. It made the dark feel heavier. When I came home in '68, I filed a personal report. Nothing dramatic, just a written account with grid references and conditions. I sent it through the proper channels. 3 weeks later, the document came back stamped, reviewed and filed, no action required. The copy I kept was missing the last page. Years passed. The story stayed locked in a small box with my service papers. Sometimes I'd pull it out, read it again, and tell myself it was over. But one evening in 1977, I got a call from an old friend who'd stayed in the Army. He worked logistics at Fort Stewart. He said, "You remember that swamp training area?" They reopened it. Testing environmental sensors, I asked what they found. He said nothing directly, just that 2 contractors went missing for 6 hours. When they came back, they couldn't explain where they'd been. Both quit within a week. He laughed when he told me, trying to make it sound light, but I heard the edge in his voice. He'd read the old report. He knew. A few months later, I drove down there myself. The main road into the refuge was fenced now, posted with new signs. Restricted federal area. Authorized personnel only. The air smelled the same, heavy with mud and pine. The water looked darker than I remembered. I parked near the old service road, sat on the hood, and watched the tree line as the sun went down. The swamp shimmered in the low light, and I swear I saw ripples where there shouldn't have been any. Wide, slow-moving ripples that spread and then stopped, like something large had just settled under the surface. I didn't stay long. That night I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about the pattern of it all. The breathing, the radio tones, the claw marks, the tracks. It wasn't random. It was organized. A behavior, not instinct. Whatever that thing was, it understood us. It tested reaction, distance, and timing. A few years later, a small notice ran in the Savannah Morning News. about a restricted wildlife anomaly study being discontinued near the Okefenokee boundary. No details, no follow-up. I cut it out and kept it. By the time the 1980s came, nobody talked about it anymore. The new generation of soldiers didn't even know the swamp had once been a training area, but every time I drove south, past those pine flats, I'd look east toward the tree line and feel that same pull in my chest. Like the place was waiting. The Army can close the road, pour concrete, and change coordinates, but the land remembers. So do I. That thing wasn't gone, it just went back under. And I knew someday someone else would see it again. In 1984, I was invited to speak at a veterans gathering in Jacksonville. The event was small, mostly infantrymen from Fort Stewart and Benning. During the social hour, I met an older man who said he'd worked for the Corps of Engineers on wetland cleanup in the 70s. When I mentioned Fort Stewart, he studied me for a long time before asking, "You ever run operations near Okefenokee?" I said yes. He nodded slowly and told me something I never forgot. He said their teams found layers of strange organic residue deep in the peat, like a thin film that gave off low radiation when wet. They logged it as chemical waste, but it didn't match any industrial sample. He said they poured concrete over it and sealed the records. Then he said quietly, "Sometimes at night, the water still moves out there. Like it's breathing." That was all. He walked away before I could ask more. A few years later, I read a short environmental report about Okefenokee fires that burned from underground peat. The article said the fire moved slow, under the surface, almost alive. That word alive stuck with me. It reminded me of the way the swamp had pulsed that night when the creature sank below. I don't believe in monsters. I believe in things that evolve where we don't look. The swamp is old. It hides life we never study long enough to understand. Maybe it wasn't evil. Maybe it was defending territory we crossed without permission. I still have the map from that mission. The edges are soft from age and the ink's almost gone. There's one note in the corner, written in pencil. Breath pattern steady. I must have written it during the debrief without realizing why. That line sums it up better than any report. In 1991, I received a letter from Mullen's widow. She said he passed quietly in his sleep. She included one of his notebooks from the late 70s. Inside were sketches, rough outlines of what we saw. One looked almost human, one more reptilian. In the margin he wrote, "It watched, not hunted." That confirmed what I had always felt. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't feeding, it was observing. We were the unknown ones that night, not it. The last time I went near the swamp was 2002. The main road was paved now, with new park signs and a visitor gate. I told the ranger I used to train near the North Line. He looked at my old ID and said the area was off limits because of unexploded ordnance and unstable ground. I nodded, but he wouldn't meet my eyes when he said it. I parked near the edge anyway. The water looked calm, black glass under the pines. I stayed there an hour, just listening. The world sounded normal. Crickets, frogs, a night bird somewhere. Then just before I left, the noise stopped. All at once, a ripple crossed the water from left to right. Not wind, not fish. A slow, deliberate circle, like something large shifting below. The air felt heavy again, same as that night in 1965. I drove away without looking back. Now, decades later, the memory still comes clear. The heat, the silence, the eyes above the water. I can recall every detail, even the smell of mud and metal. Sometimes I wake up at night and listen, just in case I hear that breath again. I've stopped trying to convince anyone. The people who know don't need proof, and the ones who don't won't believe it. The swamp doesn't care about stories or medals. It keeps its own secrets. But I know what we saw, and I know what we felt. It was real, it was alive, and it wanted to be seen. I still don't know why it let us leave. It has been 60 years since that night. I'm an old man now. Most days I sit on the porch and listen to the woods behind my house. Some nights, when the air gets heavy and the crickets stop, I think about that swamp again. People have asked if what we saw could have been a trick of lighter nerves. Maybe. But 7 trained soldiers saw the same thing. We logged it. We heard it. We felt the ground shake when it moved. That kind of memory doesn't fade. The Army never called it by name. In their papers, it was unknown biological presence. In ours, it was the lizard man devil of Okefenokee. Not a title we made for fear, but a way to explain something that didn't fit in any manual. Sometimes I wonder what it wanted. It didn't kill us when it could have. It didn't chase the jeeps or attack the post. It just showed itself, watched, then left. I think it was warning us, telling us the swamp wasn't ours to walk through like it owned nothing before us. Men like to think the world is mapped, measured, and safe. It isn't. There are still places that hold their own rules. The swamp was one of them. I've never told this story in full until now. Not to family, not to friends. I wrote it down so it won't vanish with me. Because someone, someday, will walk out there again. Maybe they'll see the same ripples. Maybe they'll hear that long, steady breath under the mist. If they do, I hope they stop and listen before they act. I can still see those eyes in the dark water, calm and aware. The world called it a monster, but to me, it felt like something older, patient, watching time roll by while men like us came and went. That night in 1965 was the closest I ever came to understanding how small we really are. Don't turn off your lights yet. If you like the video, hit like and watch the next amazing horror story showing on your screen.